And this is Elliott Serrano of the Chicago Red Eye and Geek to Me. And thank you for coming back to join me in San Diego at Comic-Con. And I have the privilege right now of being in the Rude Dude Productions booth with the man, the dude himself, Steve Rude. Steve?
How are you guys?
Thanks so much for doing this. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, sir.
For those who don't know you, and if they don't know you, they should be ashamed of themselves. Steve Rude is the co-creator and artist for Nexus, one of the most noted and one of the first independent comic book superheroes. Am I correct?
Well, we started back in 1981, and that was the decade that new things were taking place in the industry. And I've always noticed that when changes take place, they tend to take place at the beginning of a new decade. New music trends, new television shows, things like that take place at that time, and we were lucky enough to have that take place with us in the comic book industry, and in that decade. So yeah, we were one of the early independents.
Now you co-created Nexus with Mike Baron. Mike Baron, also a creator of note. That was with Capital Comics, right?
Capital Comics was our original publisher out of Madison, Wisconsin, which is the capital of Wisconsin, so that's why we called it Capital Comics. And yeah, Mike and I teamed up, and for a few years tried to do different versions of things that would sell to companies like Heavy Metal in New York. We were entirely unsuccessful, and eventually broke through with a book called Nexus.
Now, Capital Comics was your imprint, your title, your company?
I was just a guy living at the YMCA at the time. I was just kind of along for the ride, and Baron and I loved comics and wanted to do that for a living, and the timing was right, and the circumstances were right, and we were just very lucky. Luck has something to do with life sometimes, and we're very lucky about that.
So then, after Capital, Nexus goes to First Comics. Am I correct, or was it Comico, or? Correct me in the chronology there.
You were correct in the chronology. It actually went to First Comics right after Capital Comics folded, and we were always kind of in question as to how Capital Comics folded, but they eventually did after about 6 issues, and then we had so many more stories to tell, and by the time Capital folded, there were other new companies coming up into the arena of comic book publishing that we could make the jump to, and luckily enough, down in Chicago, up came something called First Comics, and we jumped ship over to them.
Then after First Comics went under, I believe, Nexus took a bit of a hiatus. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, it's funny the pattern of all these independent studios here, or companies. They're good for a couple of years, and then they plummet into oblivion. Yeah, there was a bit of a hiatus, and then we got picked up by another independent company called Dark Horse Comics.
Ah, yes, Dark Horse. Can't forget them, right?
No, because they were such good people, and they formed companies for all the right reasons. And after all these years, since we went over to Dark Horse Comics back in 1990, there's that decade thing going on again. Mm-hmm. They're still publishing, they're still going strong, and there's a lot to be said for the longevity factor here that the other companies did not have.
And now going full circle, back into Nexus is back in your hands personally and financially with Rude Dude Productions. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's a funny twist of fate that it would eventually end up in the hands of the two guys who created the books. And at this point in my life, I'm 51 now. I just decided that it was time to take charge of these characters that we own and try to make the most of them.
And outside of Nexus, Rude Dude Productions, if I'm correct in saying, Nexus is not the only book that you guys do, or that you do when you really think about it. What's the other title that's under the Rude Dude banner?
The other books that are under the banner are The Moth, which is another creator-owned character that I have with my friend Gary Martin, and then there's a couple other guys that'll be introduced during in our what do they call it? An anthology title called Amazing Dude Tales. You see that connection there with the name and all that? It doesn't take a big leap of an Einstein to But this is what I want the rest of my life to be about, and that's what the genesis of how the company got formed. If you want to call it a company, I don't even like to call it that. I just like to call it a bunch of guys having a good time.
Okay. So you say changes happen at the beginning of each decade. What does Rude Dude Productions have in mind for 2010? If you think you have an idea of what can happen then.
Well, I'm still thinking about what I'm going to have for lunch later on.
All right. Well, then, fair enough. Well, Steve, thank you so much for your time.
You're a good man, Elliott. Thank you for your time, too.
No, it's been my pleasure. And thank you so much for joining us. This has been Elliott Serrano from Comic-Con in San Diego with Steve Rude. For more information about Steve, Nexus, and the Moth, you can visit them on the web at steverude.com. Correct?
Last time I checked.
steverude.com and the Rude Dude Productions website. We'll see you in the next segment.
Bye-bye.